The armed conflict between Ukraine and Russia has now reached Moscow. The city woke up to air raids in the wee hours of Tuesday. The areas that were targeted by Ukrainian drones were some of Moscow's poshest parts, including a western zone where Vladimir Putin and other elites have residences. One person died, 4 people were reported injured in the drone strike. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow's anti-missile systems worked satisfactorily, but also laid emphasis on improving the defense system. The Russian Investigative Committee is also deployed forensic experts in order to identify the perpetrators.
First of all, I want to say that Moscow's anti-missile systems worked as they should have, satisfactorily. Though there are things to improve, we have already faced the same problems at Khmeimim Air Base in Syria. Though you cannot compare the size of our air base in Khmeimim and Moscow, which is a huge European metropolis. But in general, we do understand what we need to do is to consolidate our capital's anti-missile system, and we will be doing that.
Investigators from the investigative committee are gathering the facts of unmanned aerial vehicles falling down on the buildings in Moscow. Because of the UAV falling down, several buildings sustained some damage. According to preliminary data, there are no injuries. The emergency services of the city are working on the ground. Investigators and forensic experts of Moscow, Directorate of the Investigative Committee, are working on the ground too. The persons linked to the crime will be identified.
I live on the 16th floor. I was in the corridor with my wife and child. The explosion started. As always, we were sitting behind two walls to be safer. Then we heard the engine noise approaching. It was quite close. I was surprised because normally the air defense shoots them down. Then there was a big explosion. Windows were shattered. Doors inside the apartment were blown out as well. I looked carefully, but there was smoke everywhere. Then I went down to look at the car. After that, I was told I could not go back, so here I am, waiting.
Після цього я спустився вниз подивитися, що з машиною. Назад вже сказали не заходити. Ну і так і залишився, зараз тут чекаю.
So as we pointed out, this armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine, in fact, has now reached Moscow. Multiple reactions also coming in. Let's just give you an update of the kind of developments that have happened over the last couple of days. Now, of course, you have the IAEA chief that is asking Russia and Ukraine to protect the Zaporizhzhia power plant, even as all of this is happening. We're also understanding one person has already been dead in Russia after Ukrainian attack on the displacement center, and this is something that we in fact heard from the governor. After this entire drone attack, the fears and anger and a sense of calm in Moscow as well. So as we pointed out, it doesn't look like that there is going to be any end as far as this war is concerned, because as we pointed out, this entire armed conflict now in fact reaching Moscow. So let's just help you understand what's really happened in Moscow, where we're understanding several buildings in Moscow in fact were hit by drones, causing minor to major damage but no serious injuries. We're also understanding air defense systems also destroyed several drones as they approached the Russian capital, and this is what we were picking up by multiple reports and what agencies were reporting as well. Several of Russia's Telegram messaging channels also said that anywhere between 4 to 10 drones were downed on the outskirts of Moscow and its immediate region. So what does this drone attack actually mean as far as the future of the tensions between Russia and Ukraine is concerned? Let's bring in our colleague Sanjay Suri, who's now standing by to help us understand how can we see things escalate in days and weeks to come. Sanjay, first help us understand what are the two versions that are coming in as far as this drone attack is concerned from Russia and Ukraine.
Well, the version from the Russians suggests that these were 8 drones. There are other versions arising from within Russia suggesting there were more, some suggesting 20, some suggesting as many as 32. But clearly there was an extensive damage, though in no case particularly serious and with no loss of life. On the other hand, the version from Ukraine is that it is not they who launched this, but clearly these are groups and these are forces working with the tacit blessing and support from Ukraine that appear to have done this. We know of the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Free Russia Legion. These were the two groups that led the attack at the border by Belgorod just some days back. We know they are active and there could possibly be others. So it is clearly a proxy military group within Ukraine and perhaps operating to an extent within Russia with forces from within Russia that seem to be operating this. And you were speaking of escalation. Clearly, there is going to be escalation here. This attack on Moscow, even though it was not particularly damaging, is not something that Russia will just sit by and witness and not respond strongly to. And they have said they will consider the harshest possible measures.
Sanjay, I want to understand in terms of injuries or deaths, what is the official confirmation that's coming in?
Well, there have been no reports of any significant injuries in Moscow. We know that there were a number of attacks, 3 nights running in Kiev, and we know that in those attacks, one woman died as a result of falling debris from neutralized drones. All the drones and missiles were brought down, but that is a 100% success rate, but it does mean some fallout quite literally on the ground, which is quite dangerous, and people in Kiev particularly have been in shelters and in metro stations in fear of such falling debris.
You know, Sanjay, even at a time when...
Development that
Sure.
appears now to be...
Sure, please go ahead.
Please carry on. A development that seems to be brewing, and this I gathered from a very senior military person I spoke with in Kiev both yesterday and today, is that Russia is equipping itself for a very large-scale drone attack. And this is been fed by some reports that the military intelligence appears to have got of a number of flights having left destinations in Iran for military destinations in Russia, carrying Shahed drones and their parts for deployment and deployment after assembly in Russia. The next tactic from Russia appears to be to go the numbers way. These drones are brought down, but it does mean that a lot of Ukrainian air defense is spent in bringing down these, and the aim of the Russians now appears to be to overwhelm the air defenses in Ukraine through sheer numbers to launch wave after wave of attack. And there are some indications, though necessarily no confirmation, that this is what the Russians are now preparing for.
As you pointed out, the escalation is going to happen, but what will then this mean as far as the war is concerned? Time and again, we've debated the kind of resources that are being used with each passing day, the financial amount, the human cost. What is the kind of limit that both nations are agreed, or they seem to be ready to go to keep this war on?
Well, each is trying to outdo the other. There is only an agreement and a necessarily unspoken agreement that each will try to outmaneuver and outgun the other. And now we do see that the Ukrainians are getting more aggressive rather than simply taking defensive postures within Ukraine. And the Ukrainian view is that it cannot be that when the Russians kill, that is a legitimate war. When the Ukrainians hit back, it is called terrorism. It's called attacking civilian targets. Clearly, for 15 months, the Russians have been not shy of attacking civilian targets. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed. And the Ukrainian view is it cannot be that when the Russians attack, it's an operation, and when the Ukrainians hit back, it is provocation. Clearly, the Ukrainians are determined to hit back. They have more resources to do so, certainly the will to do so. The Russians are going to hit back further. This is going to get out of hand now.
Sanjay, we'll have to leave that conversation there. Appreciate you joining us with all those inputs.